Andre, you're not going to stop to help that woman, are you? My sister Beatrice shouted from the passenger seat, her voice cutting through the noise of the rain hammering on my windshield. I had already stepped on the brakes, slowing down on the highway that connected São Paulo to the countryside. Ahead, through the curtain of water that the wipers could barely overcome, I saw a woman waving desperately beside a car stopped on the shoulder. Steam rose from the open hood, and the torrential rain turned everything into an emergency scene. Dad always said never to stop for strangers, Beatrice continued, her voice laden with irritation. Especially in a storm like this. It's dangerous. My name is Andre Silva, I am 42 years old, and at that moment I was returning from a particularly tense family meeting. My sister had spent the last 3 hours reminding me of all the wrong decisions I had made in my life, including my stubbornness in always wanting to help others, even when it hurt me. Besides, she continued, adjusting her seatbelt impatiently, we're already late. Rodrigo is waiting for you to sign the company papers. If you keep stopping for everyone who needs help. I knew this speech well. It was the same one I had heard since I was a child, when my father scolded me for giving my lunch to classmates who had nothing to eat, or when my mother sighed as she watched me carry groceries up the stairs for elderly neighbors. For my family, kindness was synonymous with weakness, and helping strangers was a waste of time and energy. But as Beatrice spoke, my eyes remained fixed on the woman. She looked to be about 60 years old, completely soaked, and there was something about her posture that reminded me of my own mother when she was still alive. A dignity that remained steadfast even in adversity. Andre, I'm serious, Beatrice raised her voice. Dad didn't raise you to be charitable to just anyone. We have responsibilities, commitments. The meeting with the investors is in 2 hours. I felt my jaw clench. At 42, I had built a successful logistics company, paid everyone's bills in the family when necessary, and yet I was treated like an irresponsible child whenever I showed compassion for strangers. 5 minutes, I muttered, turning on the hazard lights. I'm just going to see if she's okay. Andre, no. Beatrice grabbed my arm. Remember what happened the last time you stopped to help someone? You lost 2 hours, arrived late for Grandma's birthday dinner, and she was furious. You always do this, always put strangers before family. I pulled the car over to the side of the road, about 10 meters from the woman. The rain continued to fall relentlessly, turning the afternoon into a gray gloom. Through the foggy windshield, I could see that she was shivering, trying to protect herself under a broken umbrella. She needs help, I said simply, turning off the engine. And we need to get to the meeting on time, Beatrice retorted. You always do this, Andre. Always. And then you wonder why Dad says you're unfocused, that you can't prioritize your family. I grabbed my jacket from the back seat, taking a deep breath. Beatrice's criticism echoed comments I had been hearing for decades. Before he died, my father used to say that I was too emotional for the business world. My brothers often called me naive when I donated money to social causes or stopped to help people on the street. But at that moment, looking at that helpless woman in the rain, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing, regardless of what my family thought. If you can relate to this struggle between doing the right thing and pleasing your family, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how this simple decision would change my life forever. What I didn't know as I opened the car door amid Beatrice's angry protests, was that this woman held a secret that would completely destroy the narrative my family had built about me over all these years. When I opened the car door, the rain hit me like an icy wall. Beatrice continued to scream from the passenger seat, her voice mingling with the noise of the storm, Andre, come back here right now. You're being ridiculous. I ignored her completely and walked toward the woman. As I got closer, I could see her face better. Tired blue eyes, gray hair stuck to her forehead by the rain, but there was a dignity in her posture that caught my attention. She held a soaked bag against her chest, trying to protect herself from the wind. Need some help? I shouted over the noise of the storm. She looked at me with gratitude mixed with relief. My car broke down an hour ago, she replied, pointing to the steaming hood. I can't call anyone, my cell phone has no signal. As I quickly assessed the engine, the radiator was clearly blown. My phone rang. It was my brother Rodrigo. Andre, where are you? The investors arrived early. Beatrice sent me a message saying you stopped to play hero on the road again. I'm helping someone, I replied, trying to focus on the car problem. Bro, for God's sake. You're 42 years old, you can't keep doing this. Remember last time? You helped that family with the flat tire and missed the meeting with the bank. We almost lost the loan because of you. Rodrigo's criticism echoed something I had heard since I was a child. Our family always saw me as the troublemaker, the one who couldn't focus on what really mattered. Dad used to say that I was too weak for the business world, that my tendency to help others would bankrupt me one day. Ma'am, I said to the woman, hanging up on Rodrigo, your car won't work today. The radiator is completely blown. I can take you where you need to go. She hesitated for a moment. I don't want to bother you. I can see your wife isn't happy about this. She's my sister, I corrected, and don't worry about her. Get in the car. When we returned to my vehicle, Beatriz was practically fuming with rage. Andre, have you completely lost your mind? You don't know this woman. What about the investors? What about our company? The woman got into the back seat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. If you prefer, she said quietly, I can wait right here. I don't want to cause any family problems. You won't cause any trouble, I replied firmly, looking at Beatriz in the rearview mirror. What's your name, ma'am? Isabella, she replied. Isabella Martinez. Beatriz rolled her eyes and picked up her phone. I'm calling Dad. He needs to know that you're sabotaging the company again because of your savior complex. My stomach clenched. Dad had died 2 years ago, but my siblings still used his memory as a weapon against me. Rodrigo and Beatriz had inherited his view that success meant focusing solely on money and status, while helping others was a waste of time and energy. Where can I take you, Dona Isabella? I asked, trying to ignore my sister. There's a hospital about 15 kilometers from here, she said, her voice heavy with concern. My grandson is hospitalized. I had to come quickly from Sao Paulo when I heard he had an accident. Something in her tone touched me deeply. The urgency, the transparent love in her voice reminded me of my own grandmother, who had raised part of my childhood when my parents worked too hard to care. Of course, I replied, making the U-turn. Let's go straight there. Beatriz exploded. Andre. The investors. The meeting. You're going to destroy everything we've built because of a stranger who could have called a taxi. She has no way of calling a taxi in the middle of a storm with no cell phone signal, I retorted. So what? It's not our problem. Dad always said you confused charity with weakness. He was right. Isabella shifted uncomfortably in the back seat. Through the rearview mirror, I saw tears mixing with the rain on her face. Something about her expression made me feel a strange connection, as if I already knew her from somewhere. For the next 15 minutes, Beatriz alternated between calling our siblings, we had 4 in total, and making snide comments about my chronic irresponsibility. Every word she said was calculated to humiliate me in front of Isabella. He's always been like this, Beatriz said loudly enough for Isabella to hear. Our father built a solid company, but Andre insists on throwing it all away to play the saint. Last week, he donated 5,000 reais to a shelter instead of investing in marketing. Isabella watched me in the rearview mirror, and there was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't judgment, but a kind of recognition, as if she understood something about me that I myself didn't understand. When we arrived at the hospital, the rain had eased up a little. Isabella got out of the car and, before entering the building, turned to me with a very serious expression. Andre, she said, thank you. You don't know how much this means to me. There was something in her voice, an intensity that made me feel that this encounter was no coincidence. But before I could ask her anything, she had already entered the hospital, disappearing through the automatic doors. Beatriz immediately went back on the attack. Okay, now let's see how much money you cost the family today. Rodrigo is furious. The investors have probably already left. And all for what? To impress an old woman you'll never see again in your life. But as I drove back to the meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about Isabella's gaze. There was something familiar about it, something that stirred a memory I couldn't quite place. What I didn't know was that this simple decision to stop in the rain had just opened a door to family secrets that would forever change the way I saw my own history. When we arrived at the company office, 45 minutes late, the atmosphere was like a funeral. The Japanese investors who had flown in from Tokyo especially for this meeting had already left, leaving only their business cards on the conference table as a reminder of what could have been a 2 million real contract. Rodrigo was waiting for me in the lobby, his face red with contained anger. Behind him, my other siblings, Carlos, Daniel, and Fernanda, formed a line of silent accusation. It was like being back at 12 years old, when they would call me to the family court, whenever I did something that broke the house rules. "Congratulations, Andre," Rodrigo said, his voice as sharp as ice. "You just cost the company the biggest contract in our history. All because of some old stranger." Beatriz immediately took on the role of prosecutor. "I warned him. I told him not to stop, but you know how he is. He's always been like that, ever since he was a child. Remember when he gave our Christmas toys to those kids in the slums? Or when he used his college money to pay for the neighbor's dog's surgery?" Fernanda shook her head dismissively. "Dad always said that Andre was born without a survival instinct, that he would ruin any business because of this obsession with saving the world. But this time he went too far," Carlos added, adjusting his glasses with a nervous gesture. "The Japanese are extremely punctual. They arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, waited until 2:15, and left. 45 minutes late for them is a cultural offense." Daniel, the youngest of the brothers, looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and anger. "Andre, you're 42 years old. When are you going to stop acting like you're responsible for everyone on the street? We have a company to run, employees who depend on us." I listened to every word in silence, feeling the familiar weight of guilt being dumped on my shoulders. It was always like this. Any act of compassion on my part was immediately reinterpreted as irresponsibility, selfishness disguised as kindness, weakness of character. "The meeting can be rescheduled," I said calmly. "I'll call Mr. Tanaka personally and explain the situation." "Explain?" Rodrigo laughed bitterly. "Are you going to say that you chose to help a stranger instead of honoring a business commitment? That will only confirm that we are amateurs." Beatriz pulled out her cell phone and began typing furiously. "I'm telling Aunt Helena about this. She needs to know that Andre is sabotaging the company Dad built." My stomach clenched. Aunt Helena was my father's older sister, and since his death, she had become the unofficial matriarch of the family. Her opinion carried enough weight to influence decisions about inheritance, business participation, even who was invited to family gatherings. "You're overreacting," I tried to argue. "It was an emergency. The woman needed to get to the hospital to see her grandson." "So what?" Fernanda interrupted me. "What was our emergency? Couldn't she call an ambulance? A taxi? Why does it always have to be you, Andre?" The question hit me with unexpected force. Why did it always have to be me? Why did I feel this compulsion to help people in trouble, even when it hurt my own interests? While my siblings continued their recriminations, my mind returned to Isabella. There was something in her eyes, a disturbing familiarity that I couldn't identify. When she said her grandson's name, something stirred in a distant memory, but the connection was lost every time I tried to focus on it. Carlos interrupted my thoughts. "Andre, I need to tell you something. This morning, before the meeting, I received a strange phone call." Everyone turned to him. Carlos was our accountant, meticulous and generally averse to family drama. "It was from a lawyer in Sao Paulo," he continued, asking about our corporate structure. "He wanted to know specifically about your stake in the company, Andre. He said he represented a family that was resolving inheritance issues." A heavy silence fell over the group. Inheritance issues? Our family had no unknown wealthy relatives, nor any pending lawsuits that I knew of. "Did you get the lawyer's name?" Rodrigo asked, suddenly interested. "Martinez and Associates," Carlos replied. "Dr. Eduardo Martinez." I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Martinez. The same surname as Isabella. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. "That's very strange," Fernanda murmured. "Why would anyone be investigating Andre specifically?" Beatriz looked at me with growing suspicion. "Andre, is there something you haven't told us? Any legal problems? Debts?" "No," I replied honestly, but my mind was racing. Isabella Martinez. Dr. Eduardo Martinez. Inheritance issues. The way she looked at me in the car, as if she recognized me. Daniel crossed his arms. "Well, whatever it is, you need to resolve it quickly. We can't have legal investigations in the middle of important negotiations." "And Andre," Rodrigo added threateningly, If we find out that you've done anything that could harm the company, that has compromised our reputation in any way." He didn't finish the sentence, but the threat was clear. My stake in the company, my position in the family, everything could be at risk. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the sequence of events. The storm, the encounter with Isabella, the lawyer with the same last name, the way she looked at me in the rearview mirror as if she knew me from somewhere. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Eduardo Martinez, lawyer, Sao Paulo, returned dozens of results. His office had a professional website, specializing in family and inheritance law. His photo showed a man in his 60s, with gray hair and serious eyes. There were no photos of Isabella, but the office was located in the same neighborhood where she said she lived. The pieces were starting to form a pattern that I couldn't quite figure out. On impulse, I typed my own name into Google along with Martinez. Nothing relevant came up, just normal professional mentions. So I tried something different. I searched for Isabella Martinez Sao Paulo, and found an outdated social media page. The profile photo was small, but it was definitely her. The description simply read, "Grandmother. Retired. Seeking lost connections." Seeking lost connections. The phrase gave me chills. I clicked on the Photos tab and found some family pictures. One immediately caught my eye, Isabella holding a baby, with a young woman beside her. The caption read, "With my daughter Laura and my grandson Gabriel, 3 years ago." My heart stopped. Gabriel. That was the name she had mentioned in the car, the grandson in the hospital. But it wasn't just the name that shocked me. It was the face of the woman in the photo. Even with darker hair and some changes that come with age, I recognized her immediately. It was Laura, the woman with whom I had had an intense relationship 4 years ago. Laura, who suddenly disappeared from my life, saying only that she needed to take care of family matters in another city. Laura, who never told me she was pregnant. Gabriel. Isabella's grandson. The 3-year-old boy in the photo. The dates fit perfectly. The time we were together, when she disappeared, when the child was born. I felt as if the whole world had been rearranged around me. Isabella was not a stranger I had helped by chance on the road. She was the mother of the woman I had loved. And Gabriel. Gabriel could be my son. Suddenly, the way Isabella looked at me in the car made perfect sense. She recognized me. She knew exactly who I was from the moment I stopped to help her. But why had Laura never told me? Why had she hidden her pregnancy? And why had Isabella appeared in my life right now, when my family was attacking me for stopping to help a stranger? I picked up the phone, my hand shaking, and started dialing the hospital number. I needed to know if Gabriel was really hospitalized. I needed to confirm if all this was real or just an impossible coincidence. But before I could complete the call, my cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Andre." The voice was soft, familiar. "It's Isabella Martinez. We need to talk." Andre. Isabella's voice sounded tired but determined. "We need to talk. In person." My heart was beating so hard that I was sure she could hear it through the phone. "Isabella, I just found out who you are. Who Laura is. Gabriel. He's your son," she added softly. "He was born 3.5 years ago, on March 17th. Brown hair, green eyes like yours. And yes, Laura never told you." I felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I walked to the apartment window, trying to process the information. Outside, the city continued to function normally, people living their lives, while mine had been completely reorganized in a matter of seconds. Why didn't she tell me? I managed to ask. "Because her family threatened her," Isabella replied, and there was a harshness in her voice that hadn't been there in the car. "They found out about the pregnancy before Laura was even sure. Rodrigo and Beatriz went to her apartment and made it very clear that you would never know about the child." My vision blurred with anger. "They did what?" "They said you had a promising future ahead of you, that an unplanned pregnancy would destroy your plans. They offered Laura money to disappear from your life. When she refused, they threatened to make her life a legal hell, saying they had lawyers who could prove she had faked the pregnancy to get money." Every word was like a punch in the stomach. I remembered how Laura had changed in the last weeks of our relationship. How distant she seemed, worried, as if she were carrying an invisible weight. Rodrigo said you would never believe her if she told you about the pregnancy, Isabella continued. That your family would always be more important than any woman in your life. That she would be just another one you would abandon when they told you to. That's not true, I protested, but even as I spoke, a part of me questioned it. How many times had I chosen to please my family instead of following my heart? How many important decisions had I let them influence? Laura didn't want Gabriel to grow up in an environment where he would be seen as a mistake, as something that ruined his father's life, Isabella explained. So she moved to Sao Paulo, raised our boy alone, worked 3 jobs to pay for the apartment. My anger was turning into something colder, more calculated. And why are you telling me this now? Because Gabriel is sick. Childhood leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant, and none of us in the family are compatible. The doctor said that his father has a 50% chance of being a compatible donor. The world stopped again. My son was sick. My son, whom I didn't even know existed, was fighting for his life, and I was possibly the only person who could save him. Where are you? I asked. Hospital das Clínicas, pediatric ward. Gabriel has been hospitalized for 2 weeks. Laura has hardly left his side. I hung up the phone and stood still for several minutes, trying to organize my thoughts. Then, on impulse, I called Rodrigo. Andre, I'm glad you called, he answered immediately. I need to talk to you about this investigation. The lawyer called again today. What investigation? I asked, pretending not to understand. The one about Martinez. I found out some more things. It seems they're investigating paternity. Some woman is trying to prove that you're the father of her child. My jaw clenched. How do you know that? I have contacts, Andre. And I'm not going to let some opportunist destroy our family because of your soft heart. There was pride in Rodrigo's voice, as if he were protecting me from some scam. What if it's true? I asked calmly. True. Rodrigo laughed. Andre, you're too smart to fall for that kind of scam. A woman you don't even remember properly shows up out of nowhere demanding money? It's the oldest scam in the book. Who says I don't remember her? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Andre, do you know this woman? Maybe. My God, Andre. You slept with a con artist and now she's trying to extort our family. Rodrigo's voice became shrill. Do you realize what this could do to our reputation? To our business? I took a deep breath, feeling a strange clarity settle in my mind. Rodrigo, did you go to her apartment when you found out about the pregnancy? More silence. Then Rodrigo's voice became cautious. Andre, what are you talking about? Answer the question. We protected you. She was going to destroy your future because of a pregnancy that probably wasn't even yours. We did what any family would do. You threatened a pregnant woman. We saved you from a trap, Rodrigo retorted. And look, we were right. She disappeared from your life and now shows up years later asking for money. That proves it was a scam from the beginning. I closed my eyes, feeling a cold, calculated anger take hold of me. For years, my family had led me to believe that my compassion was weakness, that my tendency to help others was a flaw that needed to be corrected. They controlled my life, my decisions, my relationships, always under the pretext of protecting me. Where are the company papers? I asked. What papers? The shareholding documents. I want to review my position in the company. Why? Andre, are you scared because of this investigation? Don't worry, our lawyers will take care of everything. But I wasn't scared. For the first time in years, I was thinking with absolute clarity. Rodrigo, I found out something interesting today. Did you know that our father left some specific clauses in his will about the ethical behavior of his heirs? There were no such clauses, but I knew that Rodrigo hadn't read the entire will. He always left the legal details to the lawyers. What are you talking about? I'm going to look into it further. And Rodrigo? I'm going to take a paternity test. If this child is mine, I will take responsibility. Andre, you've lost your mind. This will ruin everything we've built. No, I replied calmly. This will reveal everything you've destroyed. I hung up the phone and immediately called my personal lawyer, Dr. Fernando Costa, someone my father had hired years ago and who had always maintained complete confidentiality. "Fernando, I need you to investigate a few things for me. In absolute secrecy. If you've ever felt betrayed by those closest to you and are discovering how powerful the truth can be, keep reading to see how this revelation would change everything." Over the next 2 hours, Fernando explained the details of my personal assets versus company assets. I discovered that my individual stake was much larger than I had imagined. My father had structured things so that, in the event of misconduct by the other heirs, I could take majority control of the company. More importantly, there was a specific clause about actions that harmed the well-being of the family's grandchildren. If I could prove that Rodrigo and Beatriz knew about Gabriel's existence and deliberately prevented me from meeting him, they would automatically lose their shares in the company. My father, the man I always thought prioritized money above all else, had actually created safeguards to ensure that the family remained united. He may have been hard on me in life, but his will revealed that he understood the true value of family better than his own children. While Fernando prepared the necessary documents, I drove to the hospital. It was time to meet my son and find out if I could save him. But before that, I needed to confront Laura and understand how my family had destroyed not only my relationship with her, but also 3 years of my own son's life. The game had changed completely. They thought they were protecting me from a con artist, but in fact they had robbed me of the most important moments of my life. And now, for the first time, I had the legal and emotional tools to make them pay for every moment lost. When I entered the pediatric ward of the Hospital das Clínicas, my heart was beating so hard that I felt like the whole hallway could hear it. Isabella was waiting for me near the reception desk, her eyes red from exhaustion, but there was an iron determination in her posture. "He's in room 212, she said simply. "Laura is with him." We walked silently through the corridors that smelled of disinfectant and lost hope. When we reached the half-open door, I saw through the crack a scene that broke me completely. A brown-haired woman bent over a small bed, holding the hand of a child who had clearly lost a lot of weight. Laura. 3 years older, thinner, with worry lines etched across her face, but still the same woman I had fallen completely in love with. And Gabriel. My son. Even bald from chemotherapy, I could see my own green eyes staring curiously at a tablet in his small hands. "Laura," Isabella said softly, touching the door. She turned, and when she saw me, her expression went through several emotions in seconds: shock, fear, relief, and something that looked like shame. "Andre," she whispered. "I didn't expect." "Mommy, who is this man?" Gabriel asked, his voice small but clear. I entered the room slowly, as if any sudden movement could shatter the fragile reality of the moment. "Hello, Gabriel. My name is Andre." He studied me with the seriousness that only children possess. "Are you a friend of Mom's?" I looked at Laura, who was clearly struggling for words. "Something like that," I replied softly. For the next 2 hours, while Gabriel napped, Laura and I talked in the hallway. She told me about Rodrigo and Beatriz's visit, about the threats, about how they had painted a picture of me as someone who would never take responsibility for an inconvenient pregnancy. "They said you had plans to expand the company abroad," Laura explained, tears streaming down her face. "That a family would be an obstacle you would never accept. That if I told you about the pregnancy, you would accuse me of trying to trap you for money." "And you believed them?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Andre, you've known me for 6 months. Your family has known you your whole life." When they spoke with such certainty about how you would react, I was scared. I didn't want Gabriel to grow up being seen as a mistake. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Rodrigo, probably calling to find out about my investigation of the clauses in the will. "I have to take this," I said to Laura. "But first, I want to take the compatibility test for the transplant. Today." An hour later, while waiting for the preliminary test results, I called Rodrigo back. "Andre, where are you? I need to talk to you about this legal situation." "I'm at the hospital," I replied, "getting a bone marrow test for my son." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Rodrigo's voice became cautious. "Your son? Andre, are you okay? You don't have a son." "Yes, I do. Gabriel Silva Martinez. 3 years old. Leukemia. The same child you prevented me from meeting when you threatened his mother." "Andre, you're delirious. I don't know what child you're talking about." "Rodrigo, My voice became dangerously calm. You and Beatriz went to Laura's apartment 3.5 years ago. You said she was trying to fake a pregnancy to get money. You offered her a bribe to disappear from my life. Another long silence. Andre, even if that were true, it was to protect you. You didn't see the kind of woman she was. What kind of woman, Rodrigo? An opportunist. She probably didn't even know who the child's father was. It was at that moment that something inside me broke definitively. Interesting, I said calmly. Because there's a specific clause about that in Dad's will. About what? About the heir's conduct in relation to the well-being of the family's grandchildren. If any of you deliberately prevented me from meeting my own son, you automatically lose your shares in the company. Now the silence was complete. I could almost hear Rodrigo's brain processing the implications. You're bluffing. Dr. Fernando Costa is reviewing the documents right now. Dad may have been hard on me, but he would never forgive his family being destroyed by greed and manipulation. Andre, listen, maybe we can talk about this. Talk. I laughed bitterly. Like you talked to Laura? Like you talked to me all these years, making me believe that my compassion was weakness. At that moment, the doctor approached with a piece of paper in her hands. Mr. Silva? I have the preliminary results. I covered the phone and looked at her expectantly. It's a perfect match, she smiled. Your son will be able to have the transplant. I closed my eyes, feeling such deep relief that I almost fell. When I opened them again, I saw Laura standing at the door of the room, tears streaming down her face. Rodrigo, I said on the phone, family meeting tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Company office. Bring all the brothers and their lawyers. Andre, please, we can work this out as a family. You destroyed our family 3 years ago. Tomorrow you'll find out the price of lying to me all this time. I hung up and walked over to Laura. Gabriel will be fine. And now he's going to meet his father. But as I hugged the woman I had loved and lost because of my own family's manipulation, my mind was already calculating my next moves. They had turned me into a victim for years, making me believe that every act of kindness was a character flaw. Tomorrow they would discover that turning a compassionate person into an enemy is far more dangerous than underestimating any other type of adversary. Because when someone who has always played fair finally decides to use the same dirty tactics against you, they know all your weaknesses, but you never learn theirs. And my family was about to discover that I had inherited much more from our father than they imagined. The family meeting at 9 in the morning was a spectacle I will never forget. All my siblings arrived accompanied by their lawyers, their faces tense, expecting some kind of negotiation or emotional blackmail on my part. Rodrigo entered first, followed by Beatriz, Carlos, Daniel, and Fernanda. They formed a defensive line around the conference table, as if they were going to war. Andre, Rodrigo began in a conciliatory tone, I know you're upset, but we can resolve this as a family. We don't need to involve third parties. I smiled calmly and placed a briefcase on the table. You're right. Let's resolve this as a family. Dr. Fernando, can you explain the documents? My lawyer opened the folder and began reading the clauses of the will that they had never bothered to study thoroughly. Specifically, the section that our father had inserted about protecting the welfare of direct descendants of the Silva family. The will is very clear, Dr. Fernando explained methodically. If any heir deliberately harms the relationship between another heir and their children, that person automatically loses their share in the company and family assets. I watched each of my siblings' faces as reality set in. Beatriz turned pale first, followed by Rodrigo, who began to shake his head. That's ridiculous, Fernanda protested. You can't prove we knew about any child. That's when I placed the second folder on the table. Yes, I can. Laura recorded the entire conversation you had with her 3.5 years ago. Rodrigo offering money, Beatriz threatening to sue her, the lies you told about my personality. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the air conditioning running, distant traffic on the street, the sound of pages being turned as Dr. Fernando organized the documents. And there's more, I continued, my voice remaining calm. During the investigation, we discovered that you used company money to hire private detectives to follow Laura after she moved to Sao Paulo. You wanted to make sure she wouldn't come back to tell me about Gabriel. Carlos tried to argue, Andre, it was to protect you. To protect what? I interrupted for the first time, raising my voice. You stole 3 years of my son's life from me. 3 years of first words, first steps, first day of school. Gabriel is fighting leukemia, and you prevented me from being there for him. The change in the atmosphere was immediate. My siblings, who had always seen me as the weak one in the family, now faced someone who had become strategic, prepared, relentless. Rodrigo, I said, turning directly to him, you took out 3 bank loans using my stake as collateral without my authorization. That constitutes fraud. Beatriz, you diverted funds from the marketing account to your personal consulting business. Carlos, your financial spreadsheets omit approximately 200,000 reais in undeclared income. Each revelation was accompanied by documents, evidence, receipts. For months, while they thought I was being the emotional Andre as usual, I had systematically investigated every irregularity, every lie, every manipulation. What do you want? Rodrigo finally asked, his arrogance completely dissipated. Justice, I replied simply. You will transfer your shares in the company to an investment fund that will pay for Gabriel's treatment and education. You will completely withdraw from the family business. And you will explain to our entire extended family exactly why you did this. You can't force us to, Beatriz began. Yes, I can. Because the evidence of fraud I have collected is sufficient for criminal prosecution. You can choose voluntary cooperation or explanations to the public prosecutor's office. The meeting ended 2 hours later with all the documents signed. My brothers left the office as shadows of what they were when they entered. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital where Gabriel was preparing for transplant surgery. When I entered the room, he looked at me with those green eyes that were exactly like mine. Mom said you're my dad, he said with the devastating simplicity of children. Yes, I replied, sitting down beside the bed. And I'm sorry I wasn't here before. It's okay, he said, touching my hand. You're here now. Laura was in the corner of the room, tears streaming down her face. Andre, No need to explain, I interrupted gently. You did what you thought was best to protect Gabriel. I understand. 6 months later, Gabriel was in complete remission. The 3 of us, Laura, Gabriel, and I, moved into a new house, far away from all that family toxicity. The company, now under my complete direction, prospered in a way it never had before. Without the constant internal sabotage and ego-driven decisions, we were able to expand into 3 new states. Rodrigo got a job as a manager at a logistics company in another city. Beatriz opened a small consulting firm. The other siblings went their separate ways. I don't keep in touch, but I've heard that some of them eventually learned the lessons of those months. Gabriel is now 4 years old, a bright and energetic child who loves to build Lego castles with me on the weekends. When he asks about his dad's family, I simply tell him that sometimes people need to learn to be better before they can be part of our lives. Laura and I didn't start dating again right away, but our friendship grew into something deep and genuine. We are discovering together how to be a family, without rushing, without pressure, just with a lot of love for the extraordinary little human being who brought us together. The most powerful lesson from this whole experience was discovering that kindness is not weakness when it is accompanied by wisdom. For years, I accepted the narrative that my compassion was a flaw that needed to be corrected. But it was precisely that compassion that led me to stop and help Isabella in that storm. And it was that simple decision, choosing to do the right thing even when everyone around me said it was wrong, that brought me back to what really mattered, my son. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt misunderstood for trying to do good, subscribe to the channel for more stories of people who turned their apparent weakness into the greatest strength of their lives. Today, when Gabriel plays in our backyard, I sometimes stop to watch him and remember the rain that afternoon, the decision to pull over, to choose compassion over convenience. My family thought kindness was the path to ruin. They discovered that, in fact, cruelty is what destroys everything around it, while kindness, when applied intelligently, rebuilds entire worlds. The last thing Gabriel said to me before going to sleep yesterday was, "Dad, thank you for finding me." I smiled and replied, "Thank you for letting me find you." Sometimes a storm is exactly what we need to discover who we really are.